Hi, my name is Brian Gleason, and along with my wife Marcia, we are the co-creators of the Exceptional Relationship. The Exceptional Relationship is a positive and affirmative approach to working with couples that we developed over our 40 years of being in a committed relationship and 30 years of working with couples. And in particular, today we want to introduce you to the Going All the Way series of relationship skill building lessons. In this introduction, we want to help you jumpstart your own exceptional relationship. So in this particular lesson, we're going to cover some really important topics. Let me go ahead and name them for you before we get started. First off, we're going to be identifying 4 relationship myths that most couples go into committed relationships believing. Secondly, we're going to cover the 4 or 5 different relationships that you guys will develop over the course of your own committed relationship. Then we're going to touch on the stages that couples go through as your own relationship evolves over time. We'll be learning about what it is that couples are actually fighting for when conflict arises. We want to help you appreciate the diversity in your relationship, so we'll be touching on the ways that each of you comes to your relationship with varying backgrounds and proclivities. We want to take a little bit of time to explore why you might get annoyed with each other. And we'll be evaluating whether your relationship has become too serious. So in this and in all the subsequent lessons, we're going to be giving you lots of chances to practice. Watch for what we call explorations. When the explorations pop up, we suggest that you pause the slideshow and roll up your sleeves and take time to actually work with the material that we're covering. Maybe the most important part of this series, this lecture series, this skill building series. So we want you to really work it and dive into each experience. If you just watch the whole lesson from beginning to end, it probably runs about an hour, but we really hope you take the time to stop and work with the material. So let's go. Let's begin by going over what we call the grand statistics. We want to touch on why committed relationships are still so compelling. Basically, we're social creatures. We don't do well without being in the company of one another. The committed relationship, therefore, is still very much alive as a lifestyle. In the grand statistics, the majority of adults still choose committed relationships or marriage. The statistics and research has shown that relationships are our single greatest source of happiness. The committed relationship is a major factor in staying healthy and in emotional well-being. And couples who put the sweat equity into the growth of their relationship have a high rate of personal satisfaction in life. So those are the grand statistics, but now let's take a moment and poke into the grim statistics. Having an exceptional relationship means not only avoiding these grim stats, but to open up to the potential that creating real intimacy offers. But the path of the relationship and commitment is not an easy one. Marcia and I sometimes refer to it as a wisdom path or a discipline, because it requires each person to grow and to confront a lot of struggle of facing oneself. It requires humility. It requires self-responsibility, a lot of which is the material we're going to cover throughout these lessons. But because it's such a challenge, there are grim statistics. Over 50% of married couples do divorce. Domestic violence has become epidemic in some ways. And it is true that many couples who remain married do so feeling stuck, unhappy, and leading what's been called lives of quiet desperation. So just by remaining married doesn't necessarily mean you have created an exceptional relationship. But it would probably be smart to start with talking about what exactly do we mean by an exceptional relationship. If any of you are familiar with um, Abraham Maslow, many years ago, he created this hierarchy of human needs, and in those hierarchy, at the base of this pyramid of human needs is safety and security, like food, clothing, and shelter. At the pinnacle is what he called self-actualization. Now, the great thing about about all relationships and what we describe as the exceptional relationship is that it supports both ends of this um, hierarchy of needs. So let's kind of bullet point some of these. Um, Partners feel safe in each other's presence. The sense of safety that gets created in an exceptional relationship is the foundation, is the base of the pyramid. There's a high degree of trust. Partners, it doesn't mean partners don't get into conflict, that they don't step on each other's toes emotionally and energetically. What it means is that when push comes to shove, they believe that the person that they're with loves them and will be truthful with them. And in an exceptional relationship, there's a lot of laughter and lightness. This doesn't mean full on wall to wall laughter and lightness. It means that there isn't a place where couples are freed up to feel delight in each other's presence. In an exceptional relationship, there is conflict. Like any relationship, when you put two people together, conflict is part and parcel to the experience. But in an exceptional relationship, there's the turnaround time for repair and learning from the conflict is much quicker. In an exceptional relationship, partners take self-responsibility. Each person can look at anything that goes south in the relationship and be willing to say, this is my part in it. In an exceptional relationship, there's a willingness to learn and grow as problems emerge. So problems, if you haven't gotten by now, what we're saying is problems are endemic to relationship. And when they emerge, the exceptional relationship is characterized by a willingness to look at them and see that there's something to be learned and some opportunity to grow from the difficulties that pop up. There's also a desire to see each other flourish. And even though sometimes we can feel competitive, fearful of our partner's greatness, of their success, bottom line is there's a higher self part of us that wants to see them flourish. In an exceptional relationship, we can also admit to the other human realities that are really just essentially part of our humanity, such as jealousy, competitiveness, and insecurity. So exceptional couples will acknowledge these human experiences. And finally, partners find a way to balance autonomy and independence and connection. The competing needs of the human being are to be able to be oneself, to truly be authentically oneself, but also to have a deep sense of safety and security and connection. The exceptional relationship aspires to this. So just to reiterate, explorations are going to be coming up throughout this particular lesson and all subsequent lessons. We call them explorations because the aim is to experiment with new ways of interacting. The goal is not to do it right and not to make your partner wrong. In every one of these explorations, we strongly encourage you both to begin by affirming your desire to listen, to have more empathy, and to see the very best in each other. It can really help to start each of these explorations with words such as this. Quote, my desire is to share more of myself, listen to your feelings and needs, and see the very best parts of you. unquote. So let's try an exploration here. I'd like to invite you both to take 10 minutes separately to grab a journal or a writing utensil of some sort and to list the strengths and struggles of your relationship. The key in this experiment is not to talk about what you like or dislike about your partner, but to focus on the relationship itself. Let me give you a couple of examples. Quote, we have a great sex life, and yet we struggle with finances. Or, quote, we are really good at co-parenting, and yet sometimes we don't know how to have fun. So these are just a couple of quick examples, and we invite you now to go and take the time to do this. And once you've made your list, come back and take as much time as you need to sit with each other and share one at a time. The person who's sharing reads your strengths and reads the strengths and struggles as you see it. The person that's listening just hears, tries to keep your heart open and to check any place where you want to defend yourself or challenge what your partner says, and just listen and appreciate. And then as you switch roles, each of the listener again will listen and appreciate, and the person telling will go through the entire list and share what you've written. And then take a few moments to thank each other for the efforts at connection. So I probably will be beating you over the head with this reality a number of times, but it can't be emphasized enough that relationship struggles are normal. And not only are they normal, but they're in fact necessary for deepening your relationship. Truth be told, nobody has really ever taught us how to be intimate. If you look at intimacy as the willingness to be in an uncomfortable situation with each other and to stand in your truth and to listen to your partner even when it's hard, as the foundation of intimacy, more than what we've been told is intimacy is just love and peace and happiness. That real intimacy involves standing in the difficult places with each other. Nobody's ever really taught us how to do that. Exceptional relationships focus on a desire to learn and evolve through the material that living together inevitably creates. When couples seek help with us, they're typically needing guiding and education and are not, what is often described as being dysfunctional or having some kind of pathology. What their issues are lack of education and lack of understanding about how two people develop intimacy together. That's why we call our work mentoring as opposed to therapy. So in our society, we are sold a bill of goods about how our relationships are supposed to look. The media depicts either the perfect relationship or relationships that are completely dysfunctional. Not so often do we see examples of couples who work through their conflicts and as a result get more deeply connected. And yet that is at the heart and soul of the exceptional relationship is using the speed bumps, the walls that we hit up against as the very material from which we can mature and grow as human beings. In the following slides, we're going to explore 4 myths we mistakenly believe about intimate relationships. Because most of us tend to keep our conflicts private, we don't realize other couples are having exactly the same issues as we are. Many of us think that our problems are unique and in some ways shameful. So some of this is based on the fact that we operate from inadequate knowledge about what a relationship is. So let's take a moment and explore these 4 relationship myths. We've taught in many countries throughout the world, and with a few slight variations due to culture, couples fight about almost the exact same things around the world. Myth number one. In myth number one, we believe that finding the right partner means that the relationship should be easy. After all, our partner is our soulmate, the love of our life. Um, Whatever term we're taught that relationship is supposed to be, often is an avoidance of the truth of what real relationship involves. Let's take a look at what the reality is. So, the reality is that in a genuine, ongoing, committed relationship, there is plenty of challenges that we face. Uh, the hardships of life confront us, the differences in who we are as human beings challenge us in almost an infinite variety of ways. No matter how much you love someone, you are two separate people, and each of you approaches the world from your own worldview. Not only that, but a vibrant relationship involves two individuals growing through the challenges, conflicts, and change that just is part and parcel of life. Your relationship is your template for discovering the best in yourself through confronting all parts of yourself. And this is actually the great beauty of relationship, is that you get to look at yourself in ways that nowhere else in life you will be challenged to look at yourself. This is the heart and soul of what we call exceptional relationship, is the willingness to use what comes up between each other in this intimacy of spending a life with another human being. And it can be challenging, but it is incredibly rewarding. Myth number two. If I don't feel the same way about my partner, emotionally or sexually, as I did when we first fell in love, I think it means that we shouldn't be together. Okay, so this second myth, let's take a look at the reality. So, in truth, when we first fall in love, we're in a very special and time limited phase that we refer to as eros, sometimes called the honeymoon phase or the romance phase of a relationship. This is usually a highly charged and passionate time as partners get to know each other emotionally and sexually. Eros is characterized by a longing to be with each other as often as possible, by curiosity and interest in who this other human being is, by frequent and very vibrant sexual encounters, and by just feeling like life is good. The neurochemistry in each person actually changes when we are in this eros phase. But as a relationship develops, eros naturally declines and it transforms the relationship into a different kind of relationship based on a range of emotions other than the passion that eros typifies. True love encompasses a variety of responses to one another, such as respect, need, trust, vulnerability, gratitude, as well as eros. So what we're saying here is eros doesn't disappear altogether, it just tends to take a back seat. In addition, when the eros phase does wane, as it will inevitably do in all relationships, we will also encounter all of our darker reactions to our partner. This is an important point. When eros starts to wane, we will start to feel some of the darker realities of being a human being with our partner. Some of these reactions include insecurity, disappointment, a sense of competitiveness, judgment, and even forms of mistrust. An exceptional relationship makes space for all of these reactions. Partners don't generally fall out of love, they simply mistake eros for love. Let's repeat this final point. Many couples mistake eros for love. Real love is forged through facing the ups and downs together. It builds and grows over time. It is not something that we fall into, it is something that we nurture and develop. Okay, let's move on to myth number 3. Number 3 states that harmony is the indicator and goal of a good relationship. Let's take a look. So, the truth here is that harmony is a sometimes reality in relationships. Couples who believe that harmony is actually the marker of a good relationship will strive for something that's not only unattainable, but ultimately it's really not even productive. An exceptional relationship understands that periods of disharmony, tension, and conflict are fundamental and essential to growth and personal satisfaction within the bounds of the relationship. An exceptional relationship cultivates both safety and security as well as challenge. Truth is, we need our partners to make us feel secure, but we also need them to push us and challenge us. In an exceptional relationship, we open up to hearing from our partner things that are not so easy to hear, talking about our blind spots, our limits, our idiosyncrasies, the things that we do that create tension in the relationship. When we try for harmony, we fall into a pattern of colluding with each other and avoiding growth, avoiding confronting these areas in a way that actually challenges us and pushes us to become better human beings. And that brings us to myth number 4. In myth number 4, we believe that my partner and I are in only one relationship. But the truth is quite more complex than that. Let's take a look. So for many of us, we start our relationship in a phase that we might refer to as eros. Eros is the beginning stage of a relationship, and we're going to talk more about this in a couple of minutes as we go through the 4 stages of relationship. But in the beginning, when we're in eros, it's sort of like one relationship. And as we move toward greater commitment, we open up to a greater reality that we forge actually 5 different relationships with our partner. And we're going to take a look at what those are in a moment. But I want to emphasize that recognizing this important reality that you're actually in a number of different relationships is going to save you a whole lot of grief as you begin to distinguish in which relationships you flourish and in which ones you flounder. So let's take a look at the 5 relationships. So first off, your intimate partners. And this means that you're highly evolved on an emotional level and on communicating these feelings to one another. Not only feelings, but needs, vulnerabilities, insecurities, as well as the positive emotions. Emotions, as Marcia and I like to say, are the language of relationship. In another lesson, we're going to devote a great deal of attention to helping you develop an emotionally fluent relationship. The second type of relationship we develop is we become business partners. The business aspect of your relationship is the one that maybe occupies the most time. It's certainly true with us and many of the couples we work with. It involves the day-to-day running of the household, and it can also be that you guys actually are in a business together, which is certainly the case for Marcia and myself. And given that, the vast majority of your waking consciousness can be occupied with this business partnering with each other. But you're also playmates. Playing is essential to an exceptional relationship. It's also easy for it to be put on the back burner as we occupy ourselves with the more difficult and challenging parts of our relationship. But play is fundamental to a healthy relationship. It involves having fun together, laughing, having mutual interests, taking vacations, going out with friends, etc. You're also sex mates. And while everything that we know about long-term committed relationship suggests that the sexual relationship that you had at the outset evolves and changes over the course of years and even decades. And by and large, the trajectory is one toward less sex. Most comedians joke about this, and greater emphasis on other areas of your relationship. But we want to encourage you both to look at sexuality as more than just coming together and having a hot intercourse and orgasm experience. Uh, this too, over time, runs the risk of drying up. And keeping it alive is vital to an exceptional relationship. So we'll talk more about this in also, we'll devote a whole, um, we'll be devoting a whole lesson to it later on. Finally, for those of you who have children, you are parenting mates or co-parents. This, of course, involves mutual upbringing of children, imparting values, and sharing child-rearing tasks. But don't forget that you're way more than co-parents. And if you make your children such a priority that you neglect each other and start to make the children more important in some ways where you really need to be relying and leaning into your partner, you're actually setting yourself up for a whole lot of suffering and pain later on, and it doesn't really help the children in the long run. So hit the pause button, and we'd like to have you engage in another exploration here. Take a few minutes separately to write down which of the 5 relationships that you believe are your strongest suits and which ones where you believe you probably need more attention. And after you do this, come back together and take turns sharing what you wrote. And then we want you to state which relationship that you would like to put more energy into. Not the one that you would like your partner to put more energy into, but the one that you feel most drawn to putting more energy into. There's a reasonable chance that you'll both be in agreement on that. If not, dialogue about it. Talk about it. This is a step toward creating an exceptional relationship, is to examine your similarities and differences. And certainly make a pact to listen to one another with an open mind and heart, and free of the tendency and the impulse to go into judgment and criticism. Let's move now to tendencies in long-term relationships. I'm going to run through these bullet points and elaborate on a few of them. First off, we settle into habits of relating to one another that hold us back from our potential. Our relationships can become rote over time. I want to emphasize this a little bit, that each of us comes into a relationship with a great human potential to accomplish something very meaningful in life and to feel pleasure, fulfillment, and success. Sometimes in the course of being with another person, there are ways that we tend to hold each other back, not consciously, but nonetheless to create safety and security and predictability. And that's when our relationship becomes rote. We also tend not to share as much about ourselves as we did early on. Now, this may seem paradoxical because we think that over time, as we get more intimate, we're more likely to share our hearts and our emotions and our feelings and our needs and our beliefs and our vision. But in some cases that may be true, but oftentimes there is this tendency that we start to hold back more, and that very early in the relationship, when we're just getting to know each other, we're very excited and we really bring forth a lot of who we are. And then over time, we tend to think we know the other person. And so we don't ask questions, we're not curious, and we don't reveal as much. we tend to believe in this sort of sense that we really got each other pegged, and it just ain't so. We can also fall into what Marcia and I call passion drift, and this is where we start bringing our best elsewhere and less to each other. So this can be a real danger when the passions that we feel toward life we bring to work or children or play or hobbies. And it's important for us to be able to look at the ways that we lost a certain passion for each other. We are less spontaneous and more predictable, especially after kids come along. We have less fun and laughter. Sometimes we emphasize the have tos over the want tos. Again, this is a drift towards something that is going to ultimately get us to question whether the relationship is heading in the right direction. These can be real danger signs. We focus more on our partner's shortcomings and the qualities that annoy us rather than appreciating their positive attributes. This again is a tendency we've seen many times with couples, and it's a concern that sometimes we get irritated, annoyed, and critical of our partner, and it's easier for us to do that, partly because the human brain has a tendency toward what we call the negativity bias, where the brain tends to look at what's wrong and try to fix it rather than to look at what's right and live, in the pleasure of that. So this negativity bias can show up as emphasizing each other's shortcomings and missing the best in each other. We can also get disappointed and then hold resentments. Because we're vulnerable with each other, it's really easy for us to disappoint each other. And when we don't deal with those disappointments and those sort of low-level hurts, that's when we start building resentments. And resentments, in the long run, put a lot of walls between ourselves and our partners. We need to be dealing with these disappointments as they arise and talk to each other when our feelings are hurt or when the other person lets us down in some way. Otherwise, we start to build these resentments and these walls. And finally, sex can become less frequent and more routine. This is a huge tendency in long-term relationships. And we have an entire lesson that we devote to this process and creating what Marcia and I call an exceptional sex. The gravitational pull toward a certain kind of static, unspontaneous, and less connected coexistence can be very powerful in our long-term relationships. You're far from alone if you identify with these tendencies. So the problem is when after a while patterns set in, you may not have the skills or resources to restore your intimate connection. In fact, the early relationship, what we have described as eros, can never really be regained again in the way it existed in those first precious months or year of your committed relationship. But although your relationship may lose some of this early excitement and edginess, we propose that your relationship can deepen and flourish in really unimaginable ways. It helps to know that your relationship will go through some very distinct phases. So let's take a look. The 4 stages of long-term relationship. Number 1, the eros, or the romantic stage. Number 2, the security stage. Number 3, the transition stage. And number 4, the stage of the exceptional relationship. Let's pause here again and do an exploration. Take a few minutes to dialogue about what your relationship was like in the beginning. Did you experience a time when you felt passionate about this amazing person? Did the best parts of yourself show up? Is that spark still there from time to time? Finally, what does it bring up inside of you to talk about and to reflect back on the earliest phase of your relationship. It can touch a lot of different feelings for people, and we want you to take a minute or two just to talk about what it touches on. Eros is a very unique time in our relationships. When we're in this Eros phase, literally neurohormones get activated that allow us, it's almost like being drugged, except our drugs are generated from within, and they create pleasure and an openness and an aliveness and a heightening of life force. Sometimes we see colors better, our hearts are open, we feel very optimistic toward life. And all these are part of a neurochemical change that happens in this first phase of a relationship that we call Eros. But let's see what happens when we move through Eros into the other stages. When the passions of Eros wane, couples generally move into what Marcia and I have come to call the security stage, where basically two things happen. First, there's a kind of settling in or nesting instinct, and these hormones that I talked about just a minute or so ago, the neurohormones that are characteristic of the Eros phase start to die down, and different neurohormones kick in and create this coziness and nesting stage of the relationship. But it's not just that's happening in the security stage. Partners also begin to fall into these habits that we're talking about that are designed to protect against loss, rejection, hurt, and shame. These are what Marcia and I call control patterns. We're going to go into great detail in future lessons about these because this is where couples often get into the most trouble in the security stage of a relationship, when they fall into these control pattern ways of relating that cause the relationship not necessarily to have huge problems, but to get diminished, for the energy to die down, for people to stop feeling the deep sense of connection and love and passion and curiosity toward each other. So this is the hallmark of the security stage. And by the way, the security stage can last decades sometimes. At some point, 10, 15, 20, sometimes even 30 years into a relationship, couples one or both partners begin to question, what's happened here? This doesn't feel like the kind of relationship I had envisioned. And again, it doesn't mean that there's any huge problem. It could be that. But it also can simply be that one or both people feel that the relationship isn't what it could be, that there's something missing. And this is what Marcia and I have come to call the crisis of transition. It occurs when the relationship is experienced by one or both partners as stale and unrewarding. At this time, usually one of three things happens. Couples go and seek help, and they do so because they feel like something is beyond their control and they need to do something to make it better. They feel like it's over, that one of the common phrases we hear in the transition stage is, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And they don't feel like they can recover that. Or they return to the status quo. They go back to the security stage because the prospect of doing something to shake up the relationship and move it past all of the patterns that have developed in the security stage feels really frightening. And so oftentimes couples hit transition and then regress back to and live in a certain unease and unhappiness, but stay together. The transition stage can be very scary. It can also result in propelling your relationship to evolve and to discover what both of you are capable of becoming. And this is what we hope to offer in all of these lessons that we're making available to you. When you're willing to face what keeps you in the relationship dead zone, you've joined the ranks of those couples who choose to discover the best of who each person is. So where are the two of you? Are you still in Eros? Have you settled into a security that sometimes feels comfy and sometimes feels flat? Are you questioning the relationship in a way that feels scary and is asking you to take some big risks? Or have you been to the scary places and come out the far side? So this is a picture of our dear friends Marcia and Michael. Marcia and Michael have been part of a couples group that Marcia and I have been involved with for a long time, a dozen years or so. And the purpose of our group has been for couples, committed couples, to get together and to really dive deep and explore where they get stuck, where they get frozen. Um, when difficult times emerge over the course of many years of being together, there is a place for us to come together and work through everything. This is our vision of the. For your relationship to go all the way and reach its potential, there may be certain skills that you have not fully developed. We want to emphasize chances are that you're not suffering from any great dysfunction in your relationship. Like most of us, you've simply not been prepared for the rigors of intimacy. Nobody has taught us how to relate over the long haul to another human being. So all these online lessons will cover each will cover a specific topic that'll help you to cultivate the fundamentals of having a relationship that brings not only more pleasure, but is a place where each of you can become more of what you're capable of being. Okay, hit pause here. It's time for another exploration. In this one, we want to focus on your history. Each of you comes into your relationship with a different history, family upbringing, maybe different cultures, perhaps different gender, and of course, you each have your own unique personalities. In this exploration, each of you is invited to write a short biography of what makes you different and unique from your partner. Write about your history with an emphasis on how it helped you form who you are. When you're done, share your biographies with each other. Have a compassionate discussion about the differences that come out in this discussion and through your writing. Some of us grew up with more security, some with more chaos, some with large families, some small. Some encountered trauma and challenges, others did not. Some families were buttoned down and some were emotional. So write about those aspects that help make you who you are. After you've shared your biographies, you can move on to part 2 of this exploration. Here, we want you to take another step. In our work with hundreds of couples, and of course in our own relationship, we've discovered what we would describe as an almost universal principle. And that is that the part of your partner that most attracted you early on can be the same part that often annoys you now in your relationship. Let me give you a little example. So Manny fell in love with Jess because she had a free-spirited nature, which he really felt he needed more of in his own day-to-day life. He was brought up in a rigid, overachieving family. After a few years, however, Manny began to see Jess as flighty and unpredictable. This is so because at the outset, we're attracted to that aspect in our partner that makes her or him unique from us. That is, it complements us. Later, we tend to find those same parts annoying, largely because we want that person just to become more like us. We feel like we're the norm, we're the way everybody should be, and when somebody's different than us, it starts to bug us. So in this part 2, we want you to write about that quality in your partner that attracted you to them early on. Then share how that quality can sometimes annoy you now. We want you to remember, because this can be a slippery slope. Remember your appreciation of this quality in your partner and how it enhances your life. Do this exercise in the spirit of creating connection and really emphasize the attraction part. Welcome to partnership diversity. Yes, as we've said, there's a natural tendency to desire that your partner be more like you. And yet, it's through the differences that our own personal growth actually occurs, not through trying to turn each other into clones of each other. We learn from and we teach each other through our differences and our diversity. In an exceptional relationship, we turn to our natural skills of empathy and curiosity to guide us in our differing approaches to life. These natural skills, what Marcia and I call meta skills, they're going to be addressed in great detail in a later lesson. But let's take a moment now and identify a few common areas where diversity shows up in day-to-day relationship. Well, these are just a few of many possibilities for how you might be diverse and different from each other. First off, your level of energy. Some people have high levels of energy and some people low. If you try to match your partner's energy, it's probably not going to turn out so well. How you like to play. Everybody has their own way of playing and their own preferences. How you approach organization. Some people are messier, some people are much more organized. How you manifest your creativity. Every one of us has a different way that we manifest our creativity, and it can really be a wonderful part of our relationship to enjoy and appreciate each other's creative aspects. How you approach your lovemaking with each other. Some people are very passionate, some people are much more tender. Think about how you guys approach your lovemaking with each other and how often you desire sex. Child rearing philosophy. This can be a source of great tension, but in many ways, two parents bring the gifts of seeing things in a different way, and that can be a great value to the child rearing. The ability to know and express emotions, what Marcia and I call emotional fluency. Your need for contact, and for that matter, your need for space. How you handle conflict. How you approach your finances. And finally, how you express love. We are going to be exploring these areas of uniqueness throughout the Going All the Way lessons. Can you add to this list? Can you name how you're different without judging who's right and who's better? Some of these areas can be the source of tension and conflict. Try talking about them from a spirit of being interested and maybe a dash of humility. We're going to conclude this introductory lesson by asking you two basic questions and offering you a few bits and pieces to think about, talk about, and work with. First question is, has your relationship become too serious? Second, do you really know what you fight about? Question number one, are you too serious? Nearly all couples over time gravitate toward more and more serious interactions, as we've mentioned earlier in this lesson. Life has a way of grinding down our free spirit and capacity to see the lighter side of things. There's a tendency to get into what Marcia and I describe it as the misery competition. And this is where we attempt to outdo each other with how difficult our day was. Can you see this tendency in your relationship? Do you focus on how hard you work and talk mostly about what needs to get done? Are you likely to say what brings you pleasure and share your positive experiences? Do you get into a routine of life that doesn't include playfulness and laughter? The misery competition is a slippery slope of self righteousness. You're going to need to check whatever tendencies you both have to emphasize the hardships and to hold back. Time to hit pause and explore again. We want you to recall a time in your relationship when things were lighter between you, and then come back to present time. Notice that when you talk about your day to each other, what you focus on. Do you emphasize the challenges and difficulties? Can you get grouchy? What would it be like to acknowledge the best parts of your day, your successes and pleasures? What would it be like to share those things and make them more important? Recall your day and tell your partner the things you enjoyed or felt good about. And then see how that feels. If you focus on the stresses by complaining and by postponing enjoyment, you're going to become a grumpy old couple. You'll also tend to see your partner as a burden. Don't let this happen. Even when things are really tough, there's always room for lightness. Question number 2. Do you really know what you're fighting about? What Marcia and I have learned is that most couples don't really understand at the heart of their fighting. You may think you're fighting about money, sex, child rearing, extended families, etc. But we actually fight over much more essential things. Most of the fights and conflicts we have with our partner can be distilled down to one of these three things: a desire for connection, a desire for space, and a need to be valued. There's a tendency often in our relationships for one partner to be the one who fights more for connection and the other who's fighting for independence. So we're going to move into an exploration here and see if you know which one you are. Okay, here's what we want you to do. Hit pause. Take a close look at a recent fight and see if you can get underneath the surface argument. Let me give you several examples of the statements that we have underneath some of the arguments, the outer statements that we make, and the noise that comes out of our mouth when we're in an argument. When we're fighting for connection, there's often these types of inner statements. Please accept me. Listen to me. Don't leave. Can we sit down and talk? When we're fighting for space, some of the inner statements sound like this. You can't control me. I need some space for myself. I need to find what's right for me. And finally, self-value fights, the words underneath the outer expression might look like this or sound like this. You're always making me out to be the bad guy. Don't you ever notice the thoughtful things I do? So in this exploration, we want to ask you, see if you can dive down here. This is a challenging exploration, but we want you to try to really look at one of these recent conflicts you have, not go back into it and do the same old thing as to state your position and point out where the other person's wrong. But see if you can detect whether you're fighting for connection, space, or to be valued. And have a dialogue with each other about this, and do it from a place of interest and curiosity. Yeah, the final thing I want to say here is I want to emphasize that this is really important, that, and we're going to have you roll up your sleeves and go into much more detail if you choose to work with some of the other lessons. But when there's conflict in a relationship, we're fighting for something. we tend to think we're fighting against something. We're trying to push away the threat or the enemy that our partner becomes. But in essence, we're fighting for one of these three things. It makes a big difference to know what I'm fighting for, and it can open me up to empathy to know what my partner is fighting for as well. Well, this brings us to the conclusion of the introductory lesson to Going All the Way. Thanks for joining us. And if you're ready for more of Going All the Way, join us in uncovering the wisdom that's gleaned from 40 years of our experience, combined with the knowledge of many schools of thought on relationship that Marcia and I have studied over such a long period of time. Yipes. The lessons we offer are designed to provide you with the essential components of developing an exceptional relationship. We're also going to have available highly trained mentors that you can access to offer you direct hands-on support as you take on the challenge of turning this most important relationship of your life into everything it can be. So please visit us if you haven't already. You're probably there. You probably received this through our website, but check out our website as we start to unfold the Going All the Way series. Thanks so much for being part of this with us. Lastly, we want to say that the topics and lessons we're going to cover in the Going All the Way courses include, and we've talked about this throughout this first lesson, emotional fluency for deeper connection, mastering conflict, honing the relationship skills that you already possess, the innate, inherent meta skills that we've also mentioned, learning how to use criticism to grow. We'll be doing a lesson on the neuroscience of relationship, from what we call triggers to treasure, and the process of emotional layering that Marcia and I call full self-expression, discovering exceptional sex, balancing independence and connection, as we just talked about in terms of what we're fighting for, and how to welcome the best in each other. There will be additional lessons beyond those as we move further into this. So we hope you join us. Bye.